Hi, everybody, and welcome to CDITechSummitIII. Thank you all for joining us today. Today we have our industry expert panel on AIOps. I'm very excited to talk about this topic today. It's one of my favorite tech topics in modern technology. Here joining us today, do some quick intros of the panel here. Joe, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, thanks for having me. My name is Joe Byrne. I'm a regional CTO for AppDynamics.
Thanks, Joe. And Jason?
I'm Jason Walker, Field CTO for Big Panda.
Thanks, Jason. Patrick?
Hi, Patrick Bushman. I lead IT workflow solution consulting for ServiceNow.
Thanks, Patrick. And Sarah?
Hey everyone, Sarah Terry, Senior Director of Product Management at LogicMonitor.
And last but certainly not least, the winner of the title challenge today, Jesse.
Hi, I'm Jesse Trucks. I'm the Minister of Magic at Splunk.
Gets me every time. I'm sorry. I love it. It's great. Once again, I'm Vince Collado. I'm the president of the Digital Transformation Division here at CDI. And here in our digital team, AIOps is one of the most exciting topics, as I mentioned. And we've got, obviously, a panel here of some of the hottest companies in the space. So to start off, Joe, maybe you can talk to us a little bit about your definition of AIOps, just to kind of define the space for us.
Sure. So essentially, it's bringing artificial intelligence to the world of IT operations. But I always refer back to Gartner's definition. I really like the way they describe it in terms of having visibility, full stack, or using a more current term, I guess it would be full stack observability into your application and the network and the infrastructure that's hosting your application kind of front to back, having the visibility into that and understanding how it connects to it. So kind of a big data element to it. And then using machine learning to understand that data, to read it, to help you know what's important, what's not, to do some correlation, to help with things like root cause analysis or things of that nature when there's an issue or to even find an issue. And then finally, the ability to take action, right, through ideally automation, where you can find an issue and then whether it's to optimize your workload by spinning up another JVM or VM, or whether it's a new network policy that has to be implemented to mitigate the issue. But it's basically the insight or the visibility, the insights, and the action, all of that put together with big data and machine learning and ideally automation to be able to understand what's going on, find a problem, and fix it right now in real time, ideally, and eventually the idea to be proactive with it as well, I think.
Excellent. Anybody want to add or augment that in any way? Nailed it.
I mean, that was a thorough answer, is what that means.
Pretty thorough answer.
Absolutely.
AIOps, one of the reasons that we found from our customers is that it's so kind of interesting for them to talk about is they're in this world where everything's evolving, right? Things are getting more and more distributed at the application layer and the infrastructure layer. So, Sarah, can you talk to us a little bit about how AIOps can help with faster troubleshooting as applications and infrastructure become more and more distributed in today's environment?
Absolutely. So as applications and infrastructure do become more distributed, we start to typically see more data volume and more variety in that data. And that can make troubleshooting a lot more difficult. And that's where AIOps can really help. So with AIOps, we can use AI and ML to help surface what is important and what's not important. And that can help organizations focus as data volume increases. And then we can also look at what's related, what context can we provide with these surface signals that can help organizations get from issue to resolution more quickly by providing more context. And so it's really the difference between saying, you know, your database is slow and your database is slow, but we found a correlated increase in connections from another service. And by the way, that service had a configuration change earlier this morning. That kind of context that can be provided through AIOps can really help speed the troubleshooting process.
Great. Anything you'd like to add regarding from anybody else regarding the configuration management layer of that? Patrick, I feel like you guys are always at ServiceNow. You guys talk constantly about configuration management.
Yeah, I think it's super important too. And when we begin to talk about configuration management, system connections, but we begin to think about people and processes too who are impacted utilizing those services. So when we think about configuration management, we kind of expand that into that whole service graph layer. What makes up the service from the infrastructure and microservices side, but who are the people and processes utilizing that service as well?
It's a really great point. The impact, right? The human impact of how it affects people.
Yeah.
I feel like so much of this comes from the intelligence comes from the machine data, and at Splunk, Jesse, you guys have been obviously early adopters of collecting machine data and log data. Can you talk to us a little bit about the importance of leveraging that machine data to be able to get the right information at the right time in this sort of increasingly complex world?
Yeah, so I think this shows up the most these days in the cloud native applications using microservices and things like Lambda functions and that kind of thing. And I think the thing to remember is there are so many things happening even in a small infrastructure today, even an on-prem modest application, that one person can't set up something to do proper alerting on things that might go wrong. And so you have to be able to find those things that are going wrong by looking at the picture as a whole, including Patrick, like change management orders, right? Like there's a ticket about a change management and then the change happened, and were those in line or not, right? And then you match that up with what's actually happening in your environment, and then you can do some predictive analysis to try to stop before something goes wrong. And the complexity of a modern, even a fairly simple cloud native application is so vast compared to the old days of just standing up, a box and Oracle and Apache and, something really simple. And so without machine data and without advanced machine learning and AI algorithms, you're not going to be able to find these things in these incredibly distributed, especially world distributed cloud native applications.
Great. So, and actually, been in a lot of sales calls recently and client meetings recently with a couple of folks from Big Panda. And Jason, a lot of you guys are always talking about the proactive nature of that, right? Of getting the information and then sort of being proactive, leveraging the intelligence of the information you're collecting. Can you talk a little bit about
Yeah. I mean, contextualization comes in all forms, and I think Sarah nailed it when she said data volume and complexity are increasing. Just there's so many people touching any given service at any time that the failure of what used to be just tribal knowledge, you knew how things were stacked up and what ran the service. It was a lot simpler world. Now it's just too fast and too much, and so bundling all that awareness and that topological change and all of your observability data into one kind of human uh, human digestible package is a critical function of AIOps. And it really does, I mean, as soon as you get hand delivered that package, Big Panda looks at it as, hey, how good of a starting point can we get the human in the equation? And then how fast can he remediate?
It's funny when we talk about AI ops, so people always want to talk about the technology and the machine and the application and all this kind of stuff, the technical piece of it. And Patrick, you touched on this a little bit earlier. The workflow is so important, right? The people, the human aspect of it. Can you talk a little bit about the role that digital workflow plays in an AI ops initiative?
Yeah, I think everyone's hit on it, right? It's the complexity, and that's what makes digital workflow so necessary, because it helps us answer questions like who, what, why, right? What is broken, who is impacted by that service not being available, and most importantly, right? How can I leverage automation, or how can I prevent this failure in the future?
Gartner draws a line between this concept of domain-centric and domain agnostic AI ops. Jason, can you tell us a little bit about your position on domain-centric versus domain agnostic and what the difference is?
Yeah, we really look at domain-centric as an all-in-one proposition. You use that single AIOps solution across all your domains: monitoring, change, topology, incident management. And this really looks clean and simple, especially if you're a solution architect. Um, and I think the important thing to consider when you look at domain-centric is that organizationally, you're asking a lot of people to swap out their tools, and you really get into a big kind of organizational cost in terms of switching over. And once you're there, you're now you've got everything in one system. It can be incredibly powerful, but it's also incredibly big and complex, and it's hard to change. And then you switch gears over to domain agnostic. It's kind of a come as you are solution. You have your tools, your teams have a degree of uniqueness in their ops stack. They can run a bunch of different frameworks, whether it's ITIL or DevOps or their SREs and they're embedded with their app teams. They have a tool set that they're used to, and that's providing a certain data stream and letting them do their job, letting them execute changes. You bring that into a hub, a centralized hub that lets you do data preparation, some normalization, and provides event correlation and automation. And you really are domain agnostic as an AIOps solution provider at that point. You can swap out any tool in any domain across those teams as you need to. And I think that the strength there is really the flexibility that you have going forward. A lot of our customers come to us and say, hey, we acquired 3 other service stacks last year through acquisitions, and that can be incredibly challenging into a monolithic platform. So I think Gartner did a good job there. Gartner does ebb and flow in the way they define things, and that's always fun on the solution side to watch that happen and react to it.
It is fun trying to keep up with their kind of changing views of the world. As it relates to challenges, John or Joe, sorry, Joe, can you talk about a little bit about some of the challenges that you see with customers as they try to move in the direction of AIOps?
Yeah, I think that Jason just spoke to a little bit of it, right? There's changing definitions, there's new things that are happening all the time. There's a little bit of a lack of really understanding what it is and how do I get started. I remember I took a new role at a new company and I walked in and I talked to the head of IT and I said, what are we using to monitor things? What do we have going on? What kind of picture can we put together? And he says, Joe, I got this turkey and I've got 12 thermometers in this thing, but I have no idea if it's done and ready to eat. I can't put all this stuff together, right? And so there's the part about understanding what it is, what's important. There's the FUD, right? The fear, uncertainty, and doubt of people who think we're going to automate their jobs away, and when really the focus is to try to take these very, very smart, intelligent, well-paid technicians we have on our teams and have them, focus on things that are going to really move the needle versus restarting a server or something, right? And so they take that mundane work out of their world. So there's a little bit of technology is easy, people are hard, right? So culture and the understanding and adopting of this kind of thing is to me the single biggest hurdle. And I think the second would be just like, where do I start? How do I take my first foray into this, and where do I start looking at, and what data do I look at and matter? And so I think those are two of the biggest things I've seen customers trying to overcome. And so we work a lot with them on finding, a single source of pain or the most critical area, and start with just making sure you have the data. And trust is a huge part of this, right? Have data you understand and trust and can rely on, and that you're willing to, automate a change in production on. There's that much trust involved. So those are some of the things I've seen customers struggling with.
We get that feedback a lot from customers. It's like, wait, it sounds great, you want to automate everything, but then do I actually trust you to automate, in production? Is always a big topic of conversation in these AIOps discussions.
Well, that's why, what Jason was just speaking to about having that agnostic situation is it's important, because when you come in and you just say, okay, if you replace everything and use this, that's a hard line, right? Because it turns into religious battles and all kinds of things. But when people have put so much time, effort, and money into trusting the data that they're using, you want to be able to use that, because that makes implementation so much easier and much more acceptable to the people doing it.
And it comes right back to making sure you have that workflow, right? If you're going to put the automation in place, got to have that workflow really nailed down tight.
You do.
Sarah, can you talk a little bit though about the automation? How automation can really be a force multiplier though for IT, right? That's why everybody wants to do it. What's really possible in this domain, and where do you think it's headed from an automation perspective?
Yeah, that's a great question. Today, we see a lot of automation around infrastructure and application management, but not quite as much around issue detection and troubleshooting and resolution. And that's partly because AIOps is still young, but I think as we see this complexity continue to drive forward in infrastructure and applications, we're going to see AIOps and automation both evolve to kind of close that gap and make these systems more manageable despite the increasing complexity. And so I think what that means is we'll see more automation in response to some of the things that AIOps is helping with, and drive a little bit closer towards that self-healing infrastructure and applications.
That's great. Anybody want to add anything to that?
Yeah, one of the things that to go from there, Sarah, one of the things that I've seen a lot is this fear of automation. But they'll, but a human team will go and do the wrong thing 40% of the time, or there's human error, right? Trying to figure out what to do. It's always the sort of arms race of, can you train your people fast enough, because this stuff is moving beyond the speed of light. And so what I always say is, you start with something is good. When this happens, do that. When this happens, do that, right? And then have a human make a decision. But how you respond to that, a human pushes the button, and whatever automation tool they're using then performs those actions for them. So the human makes those decisions, and it removes that fear, right, that you're talking about, Vince. But it removes human error also. And then after a while, they say, we have the metrics. 85% of the time we push that button, that's acceptable for us. We're going to do it. And especially when you get into these, auto scaling environments, if you hit 95%, you're probably fine.
Well, speaking of KPIs and metrics, Patrick, what's your opinion on how customers should measure the success of their AIOps initiatives, and what, any KPIs that they should specifically be looking at?
It's interesting. It depends on who you talk to, right? Is it the ops team? Is it the DevOps team? Is it the service management team? But we have a lot of customers who focus on those MTTX type metrics: mean time to restore, detect, discover what the root cause is. I see service availability getting reported out a lot too. And I think where we're going with this is we're seeing like a lot of the importance of the business metric, right? So what value did this bring to my team or the organization because we were able to detect this outage 30% faster? And then obviously there's that predictive metric as well. Was I able to catch this with monitoring and AIOps before I had any user impact? And then I think the last most important metric that we keep going back to is workload automation. How much time, how much money did I save in preventing this outage by creating automation around it for the future?
And do you give customers the tools to be able to measure that?
Yeah, I mean, we have pretty great SLA metric reporting in terms of whether they're machine generated metrics or outage metrics against various CIs. So yeah, I think the platforms and the data platforms are definitely there. It's really figuring out what the specific persona wants to look at.
Sure. Anybody have any other KPIs or metrics that you found valuable in your experience with clients?
I think he said it really well, but operational workload, because people pay that tax of running bad ops or inefficient ops in a million different places across L1, L2, L3, and they don't often realize they've added headcount to deal with noise pretty far down the chain. And that can be hugely costly, and you get it back when you reclaim those. If you successfully implement AIOps, you get some velocity back. But when you talked about predictive, the one that I track there is average priority. If you are predictive, you should be catching incidents sooner, and your average priority across all your incidents should be going down. And that's something we've noticed. Those two, operational workload, average priority, incident volume, should be driving as well. But it's a huge topic. You could talk about metrics all day as soon as you get into these tools, because you're measuring everything.
Jason, you kind of hinted at one of the hidden costs of not doing this is churn. And it costs a lot to get people to be skilled up and understand your environment and to learn these things and to do the right things. And so if you can remove that noise, you can remove the boring parts of the job, because automated, they're machines, that's what they're for, right? And then people have more interesting work, better career paths, laterally or horizontally, or vertically, and so you end up saving a lot of money, not just in your operational budget, but in recruitment and training over time.
It's a great point. People tend to overlook that one all the time. And you mentioned earlier, people are always afraid that the automation is going to take away their jobs, so they kind of shy away from it. They don't look at the evolution of what that does to their career path. Yeah. And it enables the company to go through less churn, so it's more cost effective that way too. It's a great point. As far as, one of the things I talk to customers about all the time is when to introduce this, right? And so there's always this kind of balance between these new sort of big strategic initiatives that they're working on, and then the operational initiatives, which, and let's face it, everybody tends to think of ops as like, oh, something I'll do later, right? Right? As opposed to like you lead from the operational aspect, right? I'm a believer that the more operational efficient you are, the more you can make progress on your big strategic initiatives. But then those initiatives drive more complexity, right? So Jesse, can you tell us a little bit about, from a big strategic initiative standpoint, like how do they increase the complexity for IT ops teams? So like big strategic initiatives around like cloud and microservices and things like that.
So I think that the approach that I've seen work in a variety of customers and other organizations that I've talked to is you have to take a step back and just think about the component parts, and you implement each thing well, right? And it takes, like the whole agile approach is to development is supposed to be you do something in short bursts so you can correct easily, right? The whole, it's also similar to the like technological implementation, the fail fast. Oh, that didn't work, let's try something else, right? And you start implementing this in little pieces, and then you end up with more solid building blocks, so your foundation is better, so you can increase your complexity. And you can even start, like you were talking about Jason earlier, where you can swap stuff out, right? And so at that point, you say, oh, hey, there's a new technology, or there's a new service, or hey, this used to be monolithic. Let's take that, rip it apart, and rebuild it cloud native and go into microservices. You can start doing those things by looking at what actual actions are happening. And if you have high levels of observability using a variety of the tools that our companies and others have, then you can see what's happening in your environment, and you can start to see inefficiencies, and you can see, hey, there's like 17 steps that happen inside this one application, and we have no visibility except for in and out. You start breaking that up. How can we instrument this, right? And if you can't instrument, you replace. And so over time, and if even really you get short-term gains that last over the long term. And if you take this approach, one of the things is you kind of hinted at is everything is permanent until it's replaced. Like, oh, I'll just do this real quick. Well, now if you have a quick way to respond to that, you can say, that really was not a good idea, but at least it got us up. We can fix it late, sooner rather than later. And so this is a mindset shift, the whole shift left, right? People talk in security shift left. Well, what about operations shift left? Which means, if for those who don't know, obviously the panel does, is you move all of your concerns and your development and your security and your observability into your products and your services as early as possible in your development and implementation. And if you do that, then the next refresh or iteration, then you end up with the gains that we're talking about, and that reduces complexity by. In a sense, it increases complexity, but it reduces the management needed to do that because you have better observability and you know what parts are doing what.
We talk to a lot of our customers about this, and we say don't focus on like an AIOps project, right? Focus on the product with AIOps.
Yes.
Get your win, and then continue to iterate, cycle, move forward. So that's kind of the way we look at it.
Great way to put it.
Yeah.
I think we have time for maybe two more questions here. Jason, can you tell us a little bit about the risks? Why do AIOps projects fail, and what advice do you have for our customers considering AIOps initiatives?
Why do projects fail? There's 100 reasons. I would say for a lot of organizations, especially the larger, more traditional organizations, there's an internal battle between legacy and modern solutions, and that breeds its own politics, and that can really slow things down. And that's, speed and getting data moving. I remember a customer telling us, yeah, we loved you guys just because you got data flowing almost in the first day. And that was what they were trying to overcome. They're across the team, so there's just a huge amount of inertia in usually the status quo way of doing things. And AIOps is disruptive. You bring it in and you're automating a whole bunch of processes. There's that fear that Jesse mentioned around automation that it's going to make me redundant. And really, to get over that, you got to build awareness across your teams that there is a better way of doing things, and it's going to move them up the value chain and give them their time back. And there's just a quality of life aspect to that I think organizationally you need to lead with that. Just that we have to change, and life is better once we do change. But then spend a lot of time on getting a good fit. Organizations are super unique. Just the combination, people, process, technology. You're not always going to get a great fit from every tool. And so you got to choose carefully. And I would spend time there, really evaluating what's out there in the market, and then run a good, thorough POV. Just make sure you're actually, when I did it at one of my old companies, I threw my full production event stream at the tool, at the AIOps tool, and said, let's do a side-by-side Coke Pepsi challenge, see which one's better. And the team started to believe in that. And that's the other big aspect, is getting trust in the team, because black box will really kill any faith you have in ML or AI, because if they can't understand, stuff goes in this end and I don't know what's going to come out. Any operator is going to look at that and say, I don't want to use that thing. So yeah,
Transparency is
I
key, right?
can't stress enough though, time to value and speed. Just get things going, get momentum.
Cool. So last question for anybody who wants to talk about it. We have a lot of change going on in the industry in terms of the people, right? The people are taking on a lot of new roles. Several years ago, SREs didn't even exist, right? Now there's teams of SREs, there's DevOps teams, there's still the IT operations teams, the NOC teams have evolved. Where do you see kind of the trend going for the people and the evolution of the various teams that it takes to run a technology organization over the next 12 to 18 months?
I would say, oh, go ahead.
Sorry. All right. I would say one of the things I think coming around is, as we talk more about full stack observability, meaning not just having the data, not being able to just see it, but understanding it, understanding the context of it, being able to correlate it, put all together. I think that there's a business aspect that's going to come in that's going to be even more critical going forward. I think that we're getting to the point where understanding the technology, having that workflow, understanding how all the pieces are related to each other, understanding how to mitigate things in real time, things like that are progressing very nicely and have come a long way. But understanding at the end of the day how that impacts your customer in terms of their experience, understanding things like revenue or other KPIs around conversion or whatever it is, and having the technology teams understand that the code they're put out or that infrastructure they built, how it impacts the customer and the business. I think I've seen it create a kind of a sense of pride and ownership in that didn't exist before, and that now they have the confidence to speak up and say, hey, well, maybe we could do this to help the business, or these ideas. So I think there's going to become a kind of a business aspect to it that we're going to add to that observability play that's really going to help us feel like we can move the needle more as technologists and have a bigger impact on organizations. I see that coming, because more and more it tends to excite people when they can see the reality of these positive changes that we're making.
Patrick, you were going to say something along those lines?
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, I don't see, I mean, obviously we're all under that IT umbrella, but I don't see teams, getting back together. I continue to see, distributed DevOps teams, SRE teams. The point I was going to make, I think it's, really important for all of us to have as open platforms as possible, be able to integrate, be able to allow developers to work in the tools that they want to, SREs, engineers, dashboard, present data in the systems that they want to, while maintaining, process and operational rigor, using workflow, et cetera.
That is a really good point. We get that feedback from our clients all the time, that they want kind of openness and they want freedom of choice, right? They want to be able to make choices about what's right for their environment and go in that direction. Well, now we'll wrap up. Thank you guys very much. I appreciate your time today, and appreciate the support and sponsorship of AppDynamics, Big Panda, ServiceNow, LogicMonitor, and Splunk. Very great to get you guys all together and share some kind of industry expertise and knowledge. So thank you guys very much for the time today.
Thank
you.
Got it.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.